create a new document of 8 inches square at 300 dpi. Really, you could set the dpi and size to whatever you want, but as this is just a project demo, I've gone with what I like working with best. Give your document a name and make sure to save it to your machine, and continue saving your document periodically throughout your work. I already have the Object Manager and Object Properties Dockers open. I tend to keep them open while working, adding other Dockers as needed. Using the Rectangle tool, draw a rectangle over your page. In the Object Properties Docker, set the outline to none and the fill to an elliptical fountain fill. My inner color, to the right, will be light gray, while my outer color, to the left, will be medium gray. Use the Interactive Fill tool to adjust the shape of the elliptical fountain fill. I want the edges of the fill to be primarily in the corners of my design. In the Object Manager, right-click and lock your rectangle. This will be our background, and I don't want to accidentally move, edit, or delete it while working within the program. Using the Rectangle tool, draw a horizontal rectangle within your page. It should take up between 1/3 and 1/4 of the document. Zoom in with the Zoom tool to better focus on your work, and use the Pan tool to center your work. Set the outline to none and the fill color to white. Using the Pan tool, pan over to the left of the page. We're going to create a quick and simple repeated design and power clip it to our rectangle. I like to create designs like this off the page so I'm focused entirely on what I'm doing. Using the Polygon tool, draw a hexagon. Set the fill color to white and the outline color to gray. You can also set the outline width to 1.5 points with the rounded caps and corners in the Object Properties Docker. Duplicate the hexagon, shortcut Ctrl-D, and place it next to the first one with the pick tool. Select the two shapes. Group them together, shortcut Ctrl-G, and begin tiling the hexagons into a pattern. I find it easiest to duplicate a few groups, group everything together once placed, and then duplicate the newer, larger group and continue tiling them. Alternatively, you can create a custom tile and pattern versus a power clip. I just find it quick and easy to not worry about how a swatch is tiling versus duplicating the same basic shapes. If this was a more complex design, it makes so much more sense to create a custom pattern since I'd want there to be less nodes and paths in my document overall. When you've tiled a fair amount of hexagons, make sure they're in a large group. This group can be made up of several smaller groups. Duplicate the rectangle drawn previously and place it over the hexagon group. Select your hexagon group and go to Object, Power Clip, Place Inside Frame. Select the rectangle with the large black arrow and clip your hexagons to the shape. Place your power clip group over your rectangle. You can use the Align and Distribute Docker to make sure they line up properly on your page within your main design. Next, we're going to zoom in and add some details. Using the Ellipse tool, draw small circles in each hexagon's corners. Alternatively, you can randomize the placement of these circles. The design you're creating is entirely up to you. Group your circles together as you go, so your Object Manager Docker remains organized. Let's skip ahead to when I'm done with the circles. Group them together and let's move on to the next step. Draw or duplicate a white hexagon. Make sure the outline is set to none and the fill color to white. Using the Drop Shadow tool, drag out a drop shadow from the center to the direction of your choice. Set the Merge mode to multiply and color to gray. Reduce the transparency to 38%. Place the hexagon over an existing one and scale it down a bit with the pick tool. Duplicate the hexagon. Either apply a new drop shadow on the duplicated hexagon or copy the drop shadow over to the new shape. Repeat this process of duplicating hexagons and copying the drop shadow to add some dimension to your design. It may help to zoom in on your work, so placing hexagons is a bit easier. In total, I'll have placed 5 hexagons over my design. Group them together with Ctrl-G. Next, we're going to add dimension to the rectangle itself. Lock your power clip and other design groups in your working layer. Beneath your white rectangle, the one we drew before we created the hexagon power clip, draw a rectangle that takes up a bit more than half of your rectangle. Set the fill color to an elliptical fountain fill. Your inner color should be black, while your outer color should be white. Black on the right, white on the left. Set the merge mode under transparency to multiply. Use the Interactive Fill tool to adjust the radius of the elliptical fountain fill. As you can see, I've made it thinner and wider. Place the fountain filled shape along the bottom edge of the rectangle group. You can further adjust the intensity of the fountain fill with the Interactive Fountain Fill tool and its setting in the property bar in Object Properties Docker. Place your fountain filled shape beneath the power clip group and rectangle in the Object Manager so that the gradient peeks out from beneath, giving the rectangle an added bit of dimension. Duplicate the fountain filled shape for the right side of the design. Align the two shapes to their bottom edges, or adjust the fountain filled shapes in whatever you feel works best for your design. Unlock and group together all of your objects. Aside from the large gray rectangle we're using left off in the previous lesson, select the rectangular group and duplicate by hitting Ctrl-D. Do this twice so you have 3 rectangular groups. In the Align and Distribute Docker, align the groups to their centers and distribute to their horizontal centers. Zoom in the design and use the Ellipse tool to draw a circle overlapping the first 2 rectangles. Set the outline width to 2 points or so. You want it thick but not too thick, and color to white. In the Object Properties Docker, set the fill color to something bright, like hot pink. Choose the elliptical fountain fill and make sure the outer color is a slightly darker pink than the one in the center. Duplicate the circle and scale it down with the pick tool. Place the smaller, scaled-down circle on the right side of the composition. Copy and paste a few instances of these circles around your composition. Let's change the colors of a few of the circles. Select the topmost circle and change the fill colors to shades of yellow. You have a few options for choosing colors. I've gone for the Pantone shades simply because they're pretty. My inner color is bright yellow and my outer color is yellow-orange. Next up will be shades of gray and then shades of blue or turquoise. These colors make up my Infographic Designs color palette. You are absolutely welcome to use other color palettes or themes within your design. Let's play with connectors. Select the right angle connector. I'm choosing my line style attributes in the property bar. You can choose whatever styles you dig most. There are so many arrow and shape ends, and you can even create custom dash styles as we've explored in previous lessons. Zoom in and connect two of the circles together with a couple right angles. Set the outline color to black or dark gray, something you can easily see against the busy background. My next connector line goes from the yellow circle to the gray circle below it. I'm making sure the end of one of my connector lines is an open circle while the other end doesn't have a shape. Continue connecting large circles to each other as you see fit. Convert your connectors to curves with Ctrl-Q. I'm going to add some additional small circles around my composition, both colorful and neutral, in order to give us more places to add icons and text later on in this course. Use the Attributes Eyedropper tool to copy fountain fills from one object to another, speeding up the process of creating additional circle designs around your infographic. Use the Drop Shadow tool to add subtle drop shadows to your larger circles within your composition. Drag out the shadows from their centers and place them to the lower left. Since we've already established a slight light source with the other gradients and drop shadows, it makes the most sense to continue with that shadow direction. Group together your compositional elements created at this point, circles and connector curves, in order to keep your document and object manager organized. Let's add text. Zoom in on one of the large circles. Use the text tool to draw a text box. Type a filler word like lorem and choose a tall sans serif font like Bebas at 24 points or so. Essentially, I want it to be similar in size to the circle's diameter. Place the text in the center of the circle with the pick tool. Set the text color to white, by the way. Let's repeat this on some of the larger circles. Use other text filler words for variety and change the font size at your discretion so the words fit easily into the centers of the circles. Zoom out when you've added text to each of the large circles and let's move on to the next step within our design. Working off of our page, draw a rectangle with the rectangle tool. In the property bar, select fillet and round off the corners. I've set my corner radii to 0.14 inches, though yours would vary depending on rectangle size. Set the outline to black and 1.5 to 3 points in weight. Set the fill color to none. Draw a thin black rectangle and duplicate it 4 times. Align and distribute to their centers and group them together in the center of the rounded rectangle. Draw a small rounded rectangle at the top of the larger one. If you couldn't tell yet, we're drawing a notebook and these smaller rectangles are forming the notebook spirals. I've drawn 4 total and aligned them in the Align and Distribute docker. Grab the pen tool from the toolbox. Use it to draw a right-angled path in the lower right corner of the notebook. Make sure the outline has no end shapes, is a solid line, and of a similar thickness to the notebook's outline. To cut off the corner of the notebook, you can draw a diagonal line connecting the bottom edge of the right corner we just drew. Group together with the right angle unless you made it into a triangular object. Draw another overlapping triangle beneath the one we just completed. Select the large rounded rectangle and the newly drawn triangle and hit back minus front in the property bar. Group together your components, and let's move on to the next icon design for our infographic. Our next simple flat icon is a light bulb. Draw a circle with the ellipse tool. Draw a small rectangle and overlap the lower half of the circle. Round out the corners from either the property bar or the fillet scallop chamfer docker. Select both shapes and hit weld on the property bar or apply weld from the shape docker. Delete 2 of the side nodes to change the light bulb's shape. Draw a small ellipse in the bottom of the light bulb. Set the fill colors to white. Use the pen tool or the Bezier tool to draw a few curved lines and place them on the bottom of the light bulb. Our next icon design is a small house. Draw a rectangle with the rectangle tool. Draw a second smaller rectangle overlapping the bottom of the first rectangle. Select both shapes and hit back minus front in the property bar. Draw 2 angled lines that complete in a 5-sided object and again hit back minus front. The roof is drawn with the pen tool and is a 6-sided object that follows the contour of the house shape itself. Weld a small rectangle or rectangle-like object to the roof to create the chimney. A very small circle forms the knob on the front door. Group these objects together to complete the house. Our next couple icon designs are search tools and a check mark, all incredibly quick and easy. For the first marker object, draw a circle with the ellipse tool. Convert it to curves and use the shape tool to pull the bottom node downward to create an upside-down teardrop. Draw a circle inside the top portion of this object. Group the shapes together and scale as needed. Next up is the magnifying glass. Draw a circle with the ellipse tool and then a smaller circle within it. Select both shapes and hit trim in the property bar. Delete the interior circle and you'll be left with a ring object. Draw a rectangle, fillet the corners, and rotate it so it cuts across the ring diagonally. Weld these two shapes together to complete your icon. Finally, we have the check mark. Draw a small rectangle with the rectangle tool. Adjust the width as needed. Duplicate the rectangle and lengthen it with the pick tool. Select the rectangle again to rotate it. Rotate the first rectangle as well. Do your best to align both rectangles to their bottom edges, forming a 90-degree angle. Hit Weld in the property bar. Alternatively, you can just draw this shape with the pen tool. We're going to create one final icon design. Draw a circle with the ellipse tool and select Arc in the property bar. Rotate your arc and set the outline width to something thick like 4 points. Really, it will depend on your icon size. And set the caps and corners to rounded in the Object Properties docker. Draw a single line with the pen tool in the center of the arc as shown here. Group together this design. Now we've pretty much completed our icons. Let's place them within the composition. Select the notebook group and convert outline to object, Ctrl-Shift-Q. Change the fill color to white and scale down the icon so it fits within the gray circle. Place it within the center of the circle. Scale it down and adjust the outline size of the shape paths accordingly. Or you can convert the outlines to objects before scaling the light bulb. Set the outline or fill color to white, just like the notebook before it, and place it within the center of the next gray circle. Let's follow suit with the house. Select the house icon, convert the outline to object, Ctrl-Shift-Q. Set the fill color to white and scale it down so it fits into the small blue circle within the composition. Repeat these steps with each of the remaining icons, placing them in the centers of the small colorful circles we created earlier in this chapter. You can either convert the outlines to objects or change the outline widths manually once you've scaled the icons down. It's up to you, but if you are creating microstock, it's best to convert outlines to objects where and when it's possible. That way, users who download your graphics will be able to enjoy them as intended regardless of how they've resized the graphic. For a final touch, zoom in on the small gray circle and use the text tool to add a % sign to it. Make sure the font is a sans serif and of a comparable size to the other icons. Alternatively, you could use a money sign, ampersand, pound sign, or something else often seen within informative content. Now that we've got our icons placed around our composition, let's see about filling in the rest of the space with text and small graphics. Using the ellipse tool, draw a series of circles to use as bullet points. I've added dotted lines to the outlines of my circles. With the text tool, write out some filler words for each line. If you didn't convert your connector lines to curves previously, they will move of their own accord when other objects and content is placed near them. So make sure they are no longer objects and simply read as curves in the Object Manager. Hit Ctrl-Q to convert any object to a curve. Use a perfect shape, like this flowchart shape, as an additional graphic above the house icon. Remember that perfect shapes have special nodes that adjust key features of that shape with the Shape tool. Use this to your advantage. Duplicate shapes and fill their colors. Use the Drop Shadow tool to add some dimension to the shapes as a group. Next, I'll add an arrow. Once again, you'll find arrows ready for your use with the other perfect shapes in the toolbox. You can use the Attributes eyedropper to copy one of the elliptical fountain fills from a circle to the arrow. I've chosen to go with yellow for my arrow. Figuring out the placement of your icon can be difficult. Scale your arrow up or down, rotate it as needed. Arrows help move the viewer's eyes around a composition and call their attention to something in particular. In the case of an infographic, adding arrows will immediately point the viewer's attention to whatever the arrow is pointing at, so it's important to make sure it's something that a client, customer, or even you can add important information to later. Use the Drop Shadow tool to add a bit of a shadow to the arrow for that I've placed a sticker here look that most of these shapes and icons have. Next, we're going to add a block of filled text to the middle of our design. Use the text tool to create a box. Choose a simple sans serif font like Liberation Sans or Arial. Go to Text, Paragraph Text Frame, and insert placeholder text. You'll find your text box has been filled with placeholder Latin. Either place a white rectangle beneath the text box or add a background of white on the Object Properties docker. Resize and adjust the background as needed so the text is buffered nicely and still readable. The idea here is that you've given clients a space to write a large chunk of information. Ideally, in an infographic, there are several places where information of all sorts can be added. This demo project seeks to show a few different types of placeholder information: labels, lists, and text box outs. Of course, there are numerous ways to showcase information in an infographic, and I encourage you to explore and create fantastic methods of communicating with graphics if possible. Finally, let's duplicate the pink list in the lower right corner. Change the colors to blue or yellow, something that continues our color palette and is eye-catching at the same time. It's likely best to use the Color Eyedropper tool rather than the Attributes one this time. Once finished, zoom out and enjoy your work. Make sure to save your document, and you can export it as a PNG or JPEG if you wish.